You're listening to a Very Spatial podcast, episode 702, October 30th, 2022.
Hello and welcome to a Very Spatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to be talking about some newses, and we're going to kick things off with, I don't know, what news do we want to say that we're all, or most of us are deleting some of our social media?
Yeah, so at the end, I haven't been saying Twitter recently anyway, but yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out, so.
We haven't decided about the podcast account yet, but the rest of some of the others are going away.
And it's an unfortunate thing, right? Because the thing that's nice about social media, it's got downsides, but the nice thing about social media is it is a shared space where we can have a conversation about things, and there's some really good conversations that take place. And it's unfortunate that these things happen.
I think this goes back to what Elvin said in the last episode, that things tend to change and morph, and it's the community that makes it. And then they go on to do other things together. Yeah. So I feel like it would be nice if there was a community of curated bubbles, like what I have. I follow mostly scientists, bird people, things I enjoy. Not that asking for something curated just for me, but, would be nice.
Well, there are some alternatives out there. So if you go and Google them, you can check them out.
Let's see, I've jumped over to Mastodon, though I haven't really posted too much other than just I'm starting this and we'll probably never post again.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about that one. I thought about Diaspora. There's some others.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if I could do them all. I mean, I really just ended up being a lurker on Twitter anyway.
Yeah,
so.
Some people I think are still on Facebook.
Yeah.
I guess technically I have an account, but I don't ever go on it. So
Isn't it one of those iterations of, again, things just keep changing, and part of the geospatial realm is to be someone that moves with the changes?
Well, I mean, the space is always going to be evolving, and there are things that people tap into. And you can sort of understand why some of these other platforms that are struggling for users would start grabbing things that work. I mean, YouTube is now doing what they call them, reels or whatever it is.
Shorts.
Yeah. That's basically supposed to be for, and it's to compete in that same space, but it's kind of,
it's tough.
It is what it is.
If you're going to have people support these things, and they're going to be, big companies, they have to make money, and the money-making model remains ads largely across all of it, just as it has for TV and radio and stuff before it. And, that at some point that just, that becomes problematic. That's one of the things, why I just ended up a lot of times just lurking on Twitter, was constantly being bombarded by sponsored tweets and things that weren't part of my, as you say, Barb, curated bubbles. And I just got annoyed by that. And a lot of them I had to block, and, I'm like, how are these ending up here? Your algorithms suck. And so, but I'm saying that it's, but I get it. I mean, you gotta, if you're going to pay people to work for you, you gotta make money.
So in our housekeeping, the social media is hit or miss. So, emails still work in theory, and
so
you can find us on other platforms in theory.
Yes.
Our first news is also kind of a thing. So folks over at University of Texas have taken up a kind of a gauntlet that was thrown earlier whenever not SpaceX, but Starlink said they were going to play around with navigation themselves with their signals, but that it would be possible. And so they've gone through and basically looked at and figured out how to use Starlink's signals from multiple satellites that are up there now, of course, to allow for navigation on the surface of this planet. It uses the same ideas of GNSS that the other systems do. It's just that it's using a system that isn't explicitly meant for that, but it's sending information about timestamps and things like that along with your data that for the internet purposes. So why not?
Because, that's it, right? That's the crucial thing that allows for the location, is that those timestamps and knowing where those signals are coming from. So there's lots of different configurations and things that can give you that if you can just get the signal, as I point out.
What was interesting to me is it took them 2 years to do it. And I was thinking, normally you think about development times being, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. That was a very big challenge. But anytime during that time, that stuff could have been made available. But they found that workaround essentially. And it was because that's how long it takes when stuff's not freely available.
Well, and to be fair, you're talking about university researchers. You're working with grad students. You're working with undergrads. You're not sitting there with a group of 4 or 5 people who can spend 40 to 60 hours a week on that one thing. So, 2 years for that is actually a pretty good time frame.
Yeah.
But to flip that into a positive, the kind of cool thing about that is that, the signal is out there, and, Starlink said, we're not going to stop you, but we're not involved. Leave us alone. We have other stuff to do. So, but they were able to do it and to take advantage of a thing that existed, even it wasn't designed for that or any auspices to be that at any level. So that's pretty cool.
And they did open the door for possible uses for the future if there's, I'm thinking of emergency responses, things like that, where you do need access to a network.
Relatedly, next up in the news, a bit of frightening, for lack of a better word, thing happened down in Texas. GPS just sort of stopped working for air traffic in the Texas area. And the FAA still doesn't exactly know what happened. It happened for about 2 days. It was October 17th of this year. And the GPS signal just got incredibly unreliable. If you check out a link in the show notes, you'll see a map and a time map that shows the change over time and how bad it got. And it kind of went away. And they're not 100% certain what might have caused this. One theory is as we've talked about for, I don't know, it feels like decades now, but the entire, whatever it's called now, not light squared, but, using some GPS bandwidth to do cellular signal, there may have been testing of that in that particular area. And this is the direct negative effects if that's true, but they're not sure about that. It could have been a bizarre anomaly. It could have been solar flares. Lots of things could have caused this. But I think it kind of speaks more broadly to our expectation as GPS just works, and it just is great, and it gets us there all the time. End of conversation. And clearly this is not the case. And these things do happen. Luckily, they came up with ways to sort of make sure nobody crashed, nobody got to where they're supposed to be on time, so nobody was hurt in any of this, but it is concerning a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Dallas-Fort Worth is a major hub. Yeah. So even on a slow day is almost constant air traffic in that area. So it's a lot of impact.
What I thought was interesting wasn't just that the aviation was talking about it with the financial news. We're talking about do we rely on GPS too much for time, for knowing the time, because it was really made them hyper aware of something I don't think they had realized before.
And of course, there's a whole national defense part of this that gets rolled in because both North Korea and Russia have shown a propensity, a willingness to use technology they claim they have to jam these sort of things in various forms and fashions. So all kind of weird.
Next up in the news, a little bit of remote sensing news. So a number of times on the podcast, I know we've talked a little bit about the rise of remote sensing and remotely sensed data, and discussed going beyond the usual, right? The things that we think about that end up being, the color imagery that we see. And one of those data sources that's really important for things like elevation is radar data. And while there are satellites that capture that, a lot of that data is not necessarily super available or easy to work with. So it's really interesting that, again, that's another area of the commercial sector of remote sensing that's continuing to develop. And one of the Silicon Valley startups that's focused on this, Array Labs, actually just got some more funding. And they're looking to launch a constellation of satellites that are going to gather another set of global 3D imagery. So, of course, 3D imagery is exploding, but we haven't really had a good global set that wasn't exclusive to, was it the Pterosaur X and the Tandem X team from Airbus created one. So I've got a few out there, but really there's that. And then we go all the way back, to the Shuttle Radar topography mission to see another global data set. So Array Labs is looking to push 3D cost-effective imagery through a constellation. So they're going to use some of that money to get ready to launch a set of small, I think they're looking for CubeSats that are going to do this work. And so that's really interesting. Again, bringing CubeSats into it brings down the cost, allows you to launch quicker, launch more, and get data sets that potentially can be updated quicker as well. So again, just interesting additional focus in an area of remote sensing that maybe isn't that well known.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with the Airbus data is it really is focused more on the environmental aspects. And so their focus for Array Labs ideas, what they're going to do is more, buildings and things like that as well. So built environment as opposed to the natural environment that we oftentimes focus on with some of the existing data.
Yeah, and I like that they're looking at the evolving markets for VR and augmented reality. So I'm kind of interested in how they see their data sets playing out there as well.
So scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Biogeochemistry and IDIV have been collecting data on plant traits. They've collected over 280,000 plant species, but now are trying to create one of the most comprehensive databases using citizen science. So they're working with iNaturalist and using the power of aggregated data of citizen science, being able to go out and collect the data and map the data of plant traits, which is really exciting. I think citizen science is really becoming something that people are seeing as ways to build these databases to get a better understanding of our world and not just certain regions.
Yeah, and I like that. When I guess people aren't necessarily aware outside of the expert realm that a lot of the global vegetation maps are done at the regional level. And then there is some, ground truthing in certain areas to kind of check them. But often that ground truthing shows that maybe obviously we don't have the resolution we would like. And so this is a way to enhance that, right? To improve the resolution and allow for a filling in of gaps that were just mostly extrapolated. So it's another one. When I was reading this article, I thought, I didn't really think about that, but it's a really good example of how citizen science and bringing in that data collection and that participation can help with the presentation of data that really has scientific implications as well.
Get ready for an onslaught of spatial word salad buzzwords, but you can really start to see how, because a lot of the vegetation maps are really modeled. They're not even necessarily observed. They're interpolated and based upon models. And we just don't really have a good idea of how good our models are. We have pretty decent estimation, but they can always be better. So with this data, now we can retrain those models immensely, which is going to be wonderful. And you can see how this is going to feed back into machine learning and big data, creating ideally an impressively accurate model for the entire world for vegetation. And that's kind of exciting at the nerd algorithm level, if nothing else.
I was thinking too, it makes you really appreciate the computer in your pocket. This is because we have that technology available, that it's got the ability to do this, to make us a part of this, which is pretty exciting. People as sensors out there.
And I think to allow for keeping things up to date, because when you think about the National Land Cover data set, and when I explain this to students, I'm like, well, it's 5 years in between, and so much work goes into that. And that's just the U.S. example. Think about how much more we can do with a network that can fill in gaps in between those times, that can help the modeling, as you say, and we can potentially cut that time frame down, not just in one place, but for the whole world. So that's kind of cool, I think. And finally, in the news, a really interesting article, because who doesn't want to talk about narwhals? Because I'm always amazed that narwhals exist. But an interesting recent study came out that talked about how satellite telemetry data that was actually looking at narwhal migration was kind of starting to look at that question that we have looked at for species on land, right? How seasonal migration is affected by climate change. And so this is an example of a study that's looking at basically sea creatures and how they are actually changing. And there are some high profile examples of land animals that depend on the ocean, so think like polar bears. But these are sea creatures that have actually had to change their patterns, and they live a fairly long time. So they're not necessarily, as I know in the article, they're not necessarily suited to adapt rapidly changing conditions. And so that means, right, that for them to actually be doing that, there has to be very marked change. So it's always, I think, important to show how, we're trying to learn more about what is happening. Hopefully we can, apply those pieces of knowledge that we get to recommendations for change. But again, just thought this was interesting. Narwhals contributing to science and helping us, again, better understand what is really happening as we try to study climate change.
Yeah. A professor I know here at WVU, he said in one of his lectures about climate change that if climate change is a hoax, then we've done a really good job because the trees have bought into the hoax and are changing their behavior. And I think that that's some of the more powerful ways that we can use to communicate that this stuff is not made up. All the natural environment are adapting themselves to these changes. So it's changing whether you like it or not.
Well, I spent a weekend watching that show Mysteries with William Shatner, and it had sea creatures in it. And I hope this is the type of thing that makes it onto an episode, because I think it does educate people about our changing Earth and the use of satellites to understand those patterns. So in my head, I can just imagine that narration and the power of it. Like Sue said, who doesn't want to learn about this and what's going on? Because it's a creature we can't even believe is out there.
And that's it for the news.
So just a quick conversation for this week. We have just a couple of weeks coming up for Geography Awareness Week. So if you, of course, are so inclined to share, that's an awesome thing every year. What's some of the things in the past that you've liked to see as a person who's been either doing Geography Awareness Week and GIS Day things, or someone who's seen other people sharing their ideas about Geography Awareness Week?
So always the best thing and the hardest thing and the most challenging thing are the same thing, which is kids. Getting kids into whatever it is you're doing and showing them the cool things that you do and talking about it. It's always challenging because, particularly as they get younger, it's keeping them their attention and keeping them focused on what you have to say. Always a bit of a trick. And let's be honest, a lot of what we do isn't that exciting. When you get down to the nuts and bolts, you have to think big picture, and present that so they get excited about that stuff. But when it works, when it clicks, it's amazing.
The real question is, are they getting younger or are we just getting older?
Well, when I said by the younger, I really meant when you have younger groups of kids as opposed to high school kids. The high school kids are like, yeah, I've already passed the AP exam in this or whatever. So
yeah, they're
a little more jaded.
You've lost their attention before you even have them. So
yeah.
I don't know. One of the things that I've seen other people do, and I started doing because it was very well received, were handouts and emails with all the scholarships and resources that are out there. Because that seems to get the attention of the, especially junior high school students, their teachers and their parents. If you talk about scholarships, things you can do, camps that are going on and all that cool stuff.
I think what I have found a favorite, and this is mostly looking at others that have done this on social media websites and things, is the outreach is always great. And I appreciate all of that. But sometimes the things that draw me in are those who kind of take a little, maybe unknown corner of geography and just have like a little feature on it. And something, like why some particular place got its, very strange name or something like that. And, or little episodes like that. I find those to be really, really enticing to kind of draw me in. Because even having done geography now for a couple of decades, I will be like, man, I want to learn more about that now. And so those are the things, and they bring them out, usually Geography Awareness Week. But those are ones that I could read every day. And I do think that those types of sharing and awareness are really powerful.
So the vignette / anecdote.
Yes, the anecdotes and vignettes, but ones that you can tell, and also too, because, and one of the things that still fascinates me, and I've mentioned it a number of times on the podcast, so it's not like a surprise, is abandoned landscapes and like how they got that way. So when I'm looking at those types of little vignettes and stuff, I'll often it's like a magnet. I'll be drawn to one of those. Like I'm thinking of the very strange now looking amusement park in Japan, and of which you're like, wait, which one, right? But there's ones that have like these sort of pod-shaped things, and I think it's actually also a housing area or a resort. So I actually think it was like a park plus resort. But you're like, man, that's just kind of, out there. And then there's a whole story that explained how that happened, and so I'm easily drawn into those because you always wonder the human connection. And I'll see a photo, for example, I just saw one from the part of the U.S. where I come from, upstate New York, which is just a random picture on a forested, overgrown train track of a locomotive, and it's an old locomotive, and it's just sitting there with trees all around. You're like, how did that end up there? And what happened that place was once important and no longer so. So I have to say that those are things that always draw me in, and a lot of them happen to come out on Geography Awareness Week, and they're very effective.
I was going to say, Sue, I was just getting excited because I just saw a trailer for a movie that was about abandoned, amusement park between Canada and the U.S., where a lot of people from Detroit would go on a ferry to get to it. And they're trying to redo the ferry. And it goes along with that. You're just fascinated by those abandoned landscapes and the idea that there was this place that people from Canada and the U.S. went to and had all these stories about. But now you're like, oh, that looks very scary and haunted.
Mine, of course, is one that we can't really do still, I don't think. And that is the globe-themed cookie cake, whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
I actually tried to buy a globe costume, but it apparently didn't make it to the US, and so they just canceled the order a couple of days ago, which made me a little bit sad. I think you bought a map themed
I got a map themed t-shirt.
Kind of curious to see whether or not you'll actually wear that during Geography Awareness Week.
I am going to. It's happening. And then there's another item as well that's coming that hopefully Jesse will wear that's glorious, and so there will be pictures somewhere on our remaining social media, but I don't want to give it away yet. But
I am now frightened.
Yeah.
As am I.
Yeah, seriously.
You've seen it in pictures, but I feel it has to be experienced. So.
Okay.
Because you're taller than me.
We'll see how that goes.
Something I'm involved with, which is because one of our members of the association, and he's from Ohio, but he has been compiling a history of GIS through the movies. He and the other people at his company. And this will be the second year that we have a NASA educator helping us to moderate it, to show it. It was really popular. We had, I think, close to 70 people attended virtually last time we showed it. And he's just always looking for, episodes that show geography in action, GIS in action. I'm always texting him things when I see it, on a show. And it's just really interesting because it does give you, here's what we thought was going to happen. Here's what really happened. And here's how it works. And puts it in a context that I think people can understand in an entertaining way.
So, of course, those are kind of things that anybody can do, can take part in, can create on their own. We're hopefully going to see a lot of things coming up on podcast and YouTube and other social media platforms in the near future, highlighting geography awareness. I, of course, am always at places that are more interested in International Education Week than they are in Geography Awareness Week, which is the same week, but somehow education gets the better.
Together.
We've combined them.
The better PR.
Yeah. So I think we're working towards that, but yeah. So if you're out there and you want to see some events, look to your local university. There's lots of agencies, at least here in the U.S. and other here in the U.S. I would say is I'm most familiar with, that do events as well. And of course, on the Wednesday is GIS Day, and you can always go to gisday.org to see what kind of events are going on there, whether they're sort of hands-on demonstrations or virtual events, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you're doing an event for GIS Day, it doesn't have to be just on that Wednesday. If you're doing an event anytime plus or minus 2 weeks, put it up on gisday.org and share it with others so you can get folks in your company, organization, university, school, wherever you're doing your GIS Day thing. Share it so people know about it.
Absolutely.
I got to say, I want to change my answer because I like the one that gets you cake. Jesse's answer was better.
I don't know if it was better.
Well, the cookie, the one year was quite the hit.
Food from around the world.
Yes. But FYI, if you go that route, remember that blue and green dye do in fact color your tongue and lips. So just FYI if you use them.
It depends on which ones you use.
What's that?
But it depends on what you're using.
Yes.
So if you're using something like fondant, then it's not really an issue. But if you're using cake decorating
plus
syrups,
you could just reclassify those colors and say it's the CIR cake.
Yeah.
Sure.
So now I'm thinking cupcakes with different.
Well, there's a clever idea. You could if you do like cupcakes, and each cupcake is like a pixel of the planet.
I mean, we're in the world where people like to customize stuff. What about like circular cupcake balls that are frosted all the way around, like with fondant or something, like a globe?
That would be kind of messy, but well,
yeah, where do you get stuff all over your hands?
It'd be delicious.
And
if you use fondant, you
arguing
can pick it
the
up.
deliciousness, but there's
it'd be like a mochi.
You could do colored mochi. So if you're in Japan or you have somewhere where you have easy access to mochi or a similar rice based or similar, I guess you could dye wheat as well.
Truffle works well.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
So you can make breads.
Maybe that exists.
In fact, I've seen breads where the countries have been either baked on in a different type of bread, so having like a white bread with a wheat or rye inlay. I've seen that, I think, and maybe ones that were cheese as well, where the ocean was the bread and the continents were cheese.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm imagining it now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if
so
I've seen
now
it,
I'm
but at least
imagining a Macron.
I'm seeing it now.
Yeah, there you go.
With
right,
different colors.
So yeah, now I feel like I got to step up and create something because I already have a costume idea.
Yeah, just go with the costume this year. We don't have enough time to be planning at this point. It's too late
material
for us. We got other things we have to do on the 15th. So
because if you've got a plotter, you just print it.
Lizard Point, which was now part of GeoGuessr, lets you make map quizzes very easily. So you could quickly make a map quiz for your family, your friends, your area, and challenge them.
Okay, so lots of things out there. Think about what you can do or what you can take advantage of that other people are doing during this Geography Awareness Week /GIS Day, the third week of October, as always. Sorry, November, third week of November, as always. Yeah, that's about it. On to the Events Corner. As always, if you'd like to find out more about these events and others, check out the links in the show note.
URISA LEAP Location Enterprise Addressing and Public Safety Conference is taking place February 7th to the 9th, and that is going to be virtually.
Blue Marble GeoTalks 2023 on January 25th will be hosted virtually as well.
The 2023 International Conference in Geoinformatics and Data Analysis is taking place April 13th through 15th in Marseille, France.
Of course, if you want us to add your event to the podcast, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I can be reached at barb@veryspatial.com.
You can reach me at frank@veryspatial.com, and apparently a few less social medias at NoJoPar.
Wherever I'm at Kinda Spatial. And of course, you can find all of our contact information over at veryspatial.com/contacts, which I now need to update apparently.
As always,
we're the folks from VerySpatial.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks.